Alright, before I tell the story, I need to explain something for readers that don't live in warm climates. The inside of a car in the summer heat gets hot enough to cook someone alive. Imagine for a minute being in a low heat oven. You won't die instantly, but give it enough time and you would wish you did. There is also something I have trouble explaining to myself, and that thing is that monsters do, in some form or another, exist. I won't give too many details about the location of where all this took place because I don't want some idiot going through the shit I went through. When I was a teenager, I lived in some suburbs on the edge of a larger city. In our town, there was a scrapyard near some old torn down factories. It was out of the way. No adults went around the place. They did not want us kids in the place either. It was walled off on one side and had a barbed wire fence on the other side. That did not stop us though. A combination of the scrapyard's isolated nature and a gap in the bottom of the fence made it the ideal juvenile hangout. There were 3 sections of the scrapyard, an entrance area filled with broken TVs and collapsing furniture. It looked like a rotting outdoors version of a department store. It was where kids usually went to smoke and drink. The other 2 sections contained derelict vehicles. One contained larger vehicles like buses and trucks. More explicit things generally went on there. The type of things that led to teenage pregnancy and a small-scale STD outbreak. The other contained smaller vehicles like cars and vans. This place was rarely used for anything. Even the occasional tow-man would often seem hesitant going in there. I think kids used to do heavier drugs in there at one point. That was of course before the accident. There was a boy in my town. I will call him Lance Prince. He was older than me. We lived in the same neighborhood. I recall seeing him from time to time when I was still in grade school. By the time I was a freshman, he was a senior. He died on the second Monday of May. No one knows what clearly happened. His parents disappeared without a trace before his closed casket funeral. All that was known is he skipped school one day to get drunk with friends. He arrived early, and by the time they got there, he was dead. From what I gather, it was a gory scene. The scrapyard was sealed up. The fence and wall were put up, and kids stayed out for the rest of the year. By the time I started sophomore year, a gap was made in the fence, and kids were already throwing parties there. Around Halloween, I was invited to a party at the place. That was my first time there. I went there on a semi-regular basis until what happened to me in May during the anniversary of Lance Prince's death. I will try to explain what happened in the most logical order. I am still not quite sure what happened. I awoke in a broken down old car. My head hurt and I was just confused. I examined my surroundings and saw that the hood of the car was rusted. The sidewise mirrors were cracked to the point that they were just shards. The windshields and windows were perfectly intact though. I looked around outside and I saw that there were other cars, like my one, all parked in a circle. There were 6 in total. I could see people in them. I was not friends with them, but I recognized them from high school. I saw that the car aside from me had a guy in my science class named Fred. He was a dorky type of guy. He was smart though. I tried to remember how the hell I got here. Why was I in a car surrounded by people I barely knew in the summer heat? Just then, I began to realize I was sweating pretty hard. My clothes were getting wet. I tried to open the passenger side door, but it was either jammed or locked. When I tried to open it, Fred shot up in his car and looked at me. We made eye contact just for a second before I began to climb over to the driver's side door to open it. As I did, I heard Carl pounding on his window and yelling something. He was too muffled to hear, but as I turned to look at him, he pointed at the blue car, 9 to my 6. I looked and saw that the car's door was open. I thought of what he was pointing at for me to say, and that is when I saw it. Behind the blue car were 2 sideways SUVs. There was something behind them though. I could see the side of it peeking behind a corner. It was pulsating, like you would expect a heart to. It was also brown, with bits of green in color, like an old tree with moss. It was also large. It was easily 10 to 12 feet tall. I tried to think of what it was, and my mind flashed back to the first time I was in the scrapyard, back during the Halloween before the last. I was new to high school. I had no real friends at that point. I was sitting alone during lunch when Fred came up to me and said that there was a party at midnight after school. He said I should come, and I did. I showed up there at 6, got drunk at 7, and was sobered up at 9. People were leaving, yet for some reason I stayed. There were 6 people left by the time it reached 10. I now realize who those 6 people were. It was me, Fred, and Lance, and 2 others from our high school. Then there was that man. I did not recognize who he was, but he looked like he was too old to belong with a set of high school kids. He was wearing a worn-out looking suit, which I figured was part of a Halloween costume, which wasn't odd, considering several others at the party had on costumes. He also spoke in a deep but sensual voice. Well, Lance and the other 2 kids were joking around. Me and Fred were sitting next to each other silently. The man walked up to us and crouched down in front of us. He told us that there was an old urban legend about this place. He said that people used to be sacrificed here. I could hear Lance and the others stop talking, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw them turn to us. He said that he thought he knew the place. He said if we followed him, he could show us what looked like part of a skull that he had found. As he beckoned us closer, I followed, but Fred stayed behind. He was obviously wary of the man, but he still came after I waved to him and asked him to follow. Soon, me and Fred, along with Lance and his 2 friends, were following that strange man to the back half of the scrapyard. What came after that was a blur. As I look around the scrapyard, I see that in the car next to me, opposite of the one Fred sat in, was one of the 2 kids that were with us that night. Their names escaped me. The kid was obviously worried. Hell, he was scared out of his mind. He looked at me, then Fred, then climbed into the back seat of the car that he was in. He waited a brief moment, then opened the passenger side back door and shot out of there. He ran over to the gateway to the front yard when it got him. I first saw it moving out of the corner of my eye, and as I turned to look at it, the thing was already on top of him. It was definitely around over 10 feet tall. Looking at the thing, it seemed to be made out of what I can only describe as an organic bronze material with green rust spots growing on it like an unrinsed penny. It was in the shape of something like that of a centaur with 8 spider-like legs with a torso emerging out that was armed with 4 arms that branched off into many quivering tendrils. The head was locked onto the kids it was chasing. One of its front legs knocked him to the ground. Then a tendril stabbed him in the leg and hoisted him upward. It held him high above his head, like a fisherman holds a fish that he caught. The many slithering tendrils then jabbed into the kid. He screamed so loud I could hear him through the inside of my car until suddenly he fell silent. Then, after a few seconds, I heard a faint gurgling sound that sounded like it would be far more noticeable if I was not trapped in a broken down car. After sitting there for some degree of unknown amount of time, I turned to look at Fred and saw the red smears on the windows of his car. They were words. They spelled out, "It can't see, but it can smell. Don't open your doors." I saw him, worn out, laying in the back seat of his car. I realized that he had written the message in his own blood to warn me. I sat back in my prison cell as the horror of the situation set in. This was real. This was no movie. I could die. I tried to take my mind off of my current predicament. I tried to remember how I got involved in this mess, but I could only flash back to what happened this day 1 year ago, the day Lance died. I was sitting next to Fred in English class. He was talking about something while I was trying to catch some sleep. That is when one of the teachers walked in. She spoke solemnly. She told us that she had news that would trouble many of us. A student had died. She said his name, and several girls began to cry. I looked around the room, and I could see that most of the class was silent, including Fred. I just laid my head back down. Like I said, I barely knew Lance, so his death did not mean much to me. We weren't even in the same class. He was just one less face in the crowd. There was only one other thing that stuck with me that day. It was lunchtime, and I was sitting at a table while staring off out a window while Fred talked about something which I forget. I heard that kid, the one who was just killed by that thing, say to someone else, "Do you know if he died at the junkyard?" I turned my head to look at him, and we stared at each other. He clearly wanted to come over and ask me something. I know that he knew something about the scrapyard. He knew what happened that Halloween night when we followed that man who I had not seen since into the back part of the scrapyard. Now that kid was dead, killed by the thing that also killed Lance and would soon kill me. That is, if I didn't burn alive in this rust bucket. That is when it hit me. I had stopped sweating. I knew what that meant. I began to realize at that moment that if I did not get out of this derelict death trap, I would be a burnt corpse. If I did make a run for it, my fate could be worse than death. I could look out the window and see what the creature was doing to that guy, and I could not even tell if he was dead yet. I looked at the car beside me and saw that Fred had laid back in his driver's seat. He was not moving. I would have thought that he was dead or asleep if it wasn't for the fact that his eyes were barely open and his chest was panting very faintly. I knew that my last moments were approaching. I thought of every possible escape plan. I tried starting the car, but of course that did not work. I searched every inch of the car and found nothing but useless scrap. I even tried to push the car from inside of it for some idiotic reason. I stared at the creature and its victim. It had its tendrils inside of him. They pierced his skin in a dozen different areas and withered underneath his flesh. He would occasionally twitch and spasm, leading to the discomforting idea that he was still alive and in some form of pain I could not even begin to imagine. As I stared at the hellish sight, my vision blurred and I fell back into the driver's seat. I began to remember what happened that Halloween. Me, Fred, Lance, and the boy who was being mauled by that creature, along with some other kid, followed the man in the tattered suit to the back lot. It was the one I was currently imprisoned in. The cars in it were different, but they were in the same pattern as the ones here now. He walked to the center of the yard where the creature stood now. I can remember the visuals very clearly, yet I have trouble remembering everything that was said. I do recall a couple of things the man told us that had stuck with me for a while. He talked about the necessity of sacrifice and how the sacrifices of the lesser would strengthen those who were more significant than them. I looked around me and could tell the other kids were disturbed by this but remained silent. Fred took my hand and walked me out of there while the 3 others stood there. I looked back as we exited the yard and saw the man staring directly at me. He said something I could barely hear, but could still comprehend crystal clear. He said that those who are sacrificed need to be given a choice, to live a little longer and suffer, or to sacrifice, or to die a quick yet valiant death. I shot back up in my seat. I thought for a moment that I had dreamed that flashback, but then I realized my mind was in a state like that of a waking dream. Everything was fading in and out of focus, and I felt numb. That is when realization set in. I was dying. These flashbacks were not my memory being jogged. My life was flashing before my eyes. I climbed into the passenger side of the back seat and steeled myself for what I was about to do. I took one deep breath, then I did it. I opened the door. First I cracked it a little, then I kicked it open. I darted out of the car and to the front gate. I hoped to God the creature would be so focused on finishing its current meal to bother focusing on me. I was wrong. I heard a loud clicking, like that of someone quietly drumming behind me. I felt something hit me in the back and knock me back 3 feet into the threshold of the gate leading out of the scrapyard. I got to my knees, and as soon as I did, I felt the tendrils wrap around my torso and hoist me upward. A moment later, I was upside down and staring at the creature in its featureless bronze face. That is when I heard someone yelling. It was Fred. He stood atop the car he was trapped from across the yard, yelling at the creature. He told it to come get him. He screamed for it to come over to him and fuck him up. He tossed a rock over at it. The rock hit the creature point blank in its non-existent face. A second later, I fell to the ground and rolled back on my feet. I saw the creature pulling him up. We made eye contact one last time, and at that moment, I understood what he was doing. I ran out of the scrapyard. I kept running till I was back in the suburbs. My lungs burned and my legs began to give out. I looked around my surroundings and saw that I was in my own neighborhood. I crawled into my front yard, and my father and sister came out and dragged me inside. She sat me down on the couch and I fell over. I had one last flashback. I remembered how I got into that scrapyard. That boy, the one who was first eaten, invited me over there. He said that he was going to skip school, head to the scrapyard, and pay tribute to Lance on the anniversary of his death. He invited me, some other boy, and Fred. Fred refused, but I agreed. As I walked off with the boy, Fred grabbed my arm and said it could be dangerous over there. He said he suspected that man in the tattered suit, whom none of us had seen in over a year, had something to do with Lance's death. The man could be there, waiting to attack someone. We argued, then he gave in and came to. He said he would back me up in case anything bad happened. When I came to, I was still on the couch. My eyes were open, and I could see my parents arguing in front of me. Off to the side, I could see my sister peeking through the door. I could see them, but everything around me was sounding muted. Something was wrong with my hearing. They turned to me and saw that I was awake. They yelled at me, asking me if I was alright and what happened. I did not respond. I believe I was in some sort of catatonic state. What they said for the most part did not even register. One thing stuck with me though. It still haunts me today. They asked if I saw the creature. After I did not respond, my dad grabbed me and desperately pleaded with me that I could not tell anyone what I saw. I recovered from whatever mental state I was in on my own. By the time I did, however, we had moved to the next town over. I later found out that 3 teens were found dead at that scrapyard. I went out of my way to avoid hearing the news about it, but I knew who they were. The city doubled down on keeping kids out of the scrapyard. A brick wall was erected around the place. I know how much of an idiot people are when they are young, and how determined they are when told they should not do something. There will be a gap in those walls eventually. Bro fucking wrote a movie script. Fucking flashback Andy. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you do and you want to hear more, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment down below, as it lets the algorithm know that you like my content and it promotes it to more people. My goal for the channel is to hit 50,000 subscribers, and we're closing in fast, so thank you, and back to the stories. A few years ago, I was renting a house in Northern California. The neighborhood was just outside the suburbs. It seemed like the perfect balance of having space and having nice neighbors close enough to not feel isolated. The area had no streetlights, so it was very dark at night, especially if there were clouds blocking the moonlight. It did not bother me though. It made my little house feel even more quaint on dark nights. I got home from work one day in midwinter. It was a cloudy night, so pulling up to my house, I saw only what my headlights and front porch light illuminated. When I got out of my car, I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke. That was odd, as I had never smelled that before around the house. I did not see anyone nearby, so I ignored it and went inside. I had just got off a shift with a few hours of overtime, so I felt pretty tired. Even though it was not even 7 yet, I decided to take a shower and call it a night. I woke up sometime later, sure that I had heard a noise inside my house. I was not worried right away, because my friend would sometimes stop by to use my shower after work on his way to his night classes. I even gave him a spare key so he could stop by even if I was not home. He would always text me to let me know beforehand though, and I had not heard my phone go off. I reached over to my bedside table and picked up my cell phone to see if my friend had sent me a text. The bright light from my phone screen and number pad blinded me. These were the days before phones had a light sensor that would dim the screen in the dark, and this particular phone was so bright I could use it as a flashlight. Through squinted eyes, I could make out that it was 9-something, but I could not tell if I had an unread text or not. I set my phone aside and called out my friend's name. There were a couple of seconds of silence before I heard loud footfalls as someone started running through the bottom floor of my house. I leapt out of bed and ran to the closet. They were already up the stairs by the time I had opened the door and stepped inside. That house had 3 rooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms on either side of the hallway, the one I was in and a spare, and a bathroom at the end. The bedroom doors were both closed, but the bathroom door was cracked open. I heard whoever was in my house thunder down the hallway, past my door, and into the bathroom. Thank God he did. That gave me enough time to open the attic access in the ceiling of my closet and hoist myself up. I had just started to lift myself up when the person ran back out of the bathroom. My feet were barely inside of the attic when my bedroom door burst open. I heard footsteps run into my room and stop. When they did not see me in that room, they ran back to the hallway and into the other room, which just had boxes stacked in a corner, some weights, and a table where I painted my miniature models. I guess they decided that if someone were hiding, it would be in the bedroom because they charged back into my room and turned on the light. A moment later, the closet door was ripped open. I was crouched in my attic, just a foot or so away from the access, so I could try to stop them if they started to climb up. From my vantage point, all I could see was from about their knee down. They were wearing dirty blue jeans with frayed cuffs and worn work boots. After a few seconds of looking in the closet, they stepped away, and I heard a loud crash come from my room, followed by a scream of frustration and anger. The scream was the most unnerving part of the incident for me. It reminded me far too much of my stepfather, who would scream in a similar way when he lost his temper. He would eventually be put in a mental hospital for several mental disorders that resulted in erratic and violent tendencies. The man in my house ran back down the stairs. I heard crashes and clatters as things were thrown around and furniture was knocked over. I stayed crouched in the attic. I had left my cell phone when I ran for the closet, and I was not certain I could climb down without him hearing. After some time, the noises stopped. I started counting slowly. When I reached 1,000, I decided it was safe enough to climb down and call the police. The first thing I noticed when I exited the closet was the intruder had flipped my bed over, I assume in an attempt to find me. That was the loud noise I had heard after he stepped away from the closet. I could not find my cell phone, so I went to the landline by the bed and called the police. I waited in my room until I heard them call out from downstairs. The first floor was a mess, but I had expected that. Chairs had been knocked over, the sofa had been flipped. All the books, pictures, and knickknacks I had on my shelves were strewn across the floor. The cupboards in the kitchen had been opened, and all the boxed and canned foods had been thrown to the ground. As far as I could tell though, the only thing missing was a single knife out of the wooden block in my kitchen. The police checked the house from top to bottom. They found that the side door had been forced open by something like a crowbar. They also found a few cigarette butts along my fence line, along with some foil and an empty pen tube which the police said people often use to smoke meth, so they think he had been watching my house for a while. I realized that he must have been out there smoking a cigarette when I got home. They collected up the evidence and told me I should stay with family or friends that night and get that door fixed as soon as possible. I opted to just not sleep. I moved a shelf over to block the broken door and spent the next couple hours cleaning things up. I would often go to the window with a flashlight and shine it along the fence line where the police found the cigarette butts and foil, but I did not see anything. The next day, I called to have the door fixed and motion lights installed at the back and sides of my house. I ran a phone cable up into the attic and added a landline. I never wanted to be stuck up there without a phone again. Nothing else happened at the house though. I lived there and never for years without incident. Bime, DD214 out of Air Force in 2021. Living with parents, have bedroom across from the front door. Bed is against the wall, closest to the bedroom door, and the door is open. Aunt and uncle visiting, they are sleeping in the living room. Can't go to sleep, but still trying. Hear a knock at the front door. I wonder who it is. I hear a hello coming from the front door. Sounds like a kid, but it was as if somebody was playing the voice from a tape recorder. Nope. I'm going to stop green texting here and just explain what was happening. This kid keeps saying hello for a good minute, and I wonder why my aunt and uncle do not hear anything. Also, it was right around the time we were upgrading our security systems, so we did not have any recordings of the front door. My blood ran cold once I realized all of the hellos sounded the same. There was no change in pitch or resonance. I used to be a radio dispatcher, so I could make out the most incoherent speech from a garbled garbage radio transmission at 2 in the morning. What bothered me was how I just froze, like primal fear seeped through me, as if I knew deep down this was not right. I thought, what the hell is going on? Why am I so fucking scared? I have weapons to defend myself and enough training to blast whatever is repeating itself at my front door. At least, that's what I thought. After a minute or two, it stopped, and after 5 minutes, I got out of bed and looked at my phone. It was 11 p.m., and there was no one at the front door. I could tell, since I peeked out of my door, and no one was standing on the porch, casting a shadow on the frosted glass door. I eventually calmed down and went to sleep. I woke up the next morning and asked my parents if my aunt and uncle heard anything while they were sleeping. My parents were confused why they would hear anything and asked what happened last night. I told them that as I was trying to sleep, it sounded as if someone was at the door with a tape recorder of a kid saying hello. Be me, mid-20s, living alone. Wake up in the dead of the night. Really odd abdominal cramps for some bizarre reason. No idea why at all. Go through to the bathroom. Sit down and get ready to poop. Straining. Suddenly hear this really odd, raspy / gurgling sort of rushing air. Sounded like a balloon deflating. Whole room fills up with this awful smell of rotten meat out of nowhere. Hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Have this unreal feeling of dread. Whole house has gone dead silent. I live in the countryside, and normally you can hear some animals at night at least. Cramps have gone, but there is no poop. There is literally nothing there. Freak out. Switch on all the lights, get my 12 gauge out of the closet, and start shouting as loud as I can to scare away anything close by. Eventually calm down, but I have no idea what happened to this day. Haven't had anything like it before or since. Still scared to go to the bathroom at night to this day. Got chills just typing this out even now. No idea what happened. I live in Washington, and about a week ago, my dog and I saw an elf or gnome or little person, I don't know what to call it. I live in a small town, fairly close to Mount Rainier. The main source of jobs is logging. The whole town is surrounded by Weyerhaeuser tree farms. I don't get home from work until after dark, and it was maybe 10:40 p.m. when I took my dog on a walk. We did our normal route, and when we were coming back along the main street, passing the gas station / small engine repair center, he started growling. I look in the direction he is indicating, and there was this tiny, human-shaped figure illuminated in the bluish glow from the metal porch light. Was slightly shorter than the tire of the trailer it was standing next to. Once it realized I saw it, it did this exaggerated, slow-motion run towards the other side of the trailer, and it vanished mid-step. This was my first paranormal experience, and I honestly don't know what to make of it. My girlfriend does not believe me, and said it was probably a raccoon, but it did not have the same fat body as a raccoon. I don't know.